Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for having me. It's been 2 months. I was on a trip to the United States, to New York, and so I thought I would teach from there, that I would be able to do these videos, but things I got sidetracked in a lot of different directions, and thank God I went for good reasons. My niece got married, so that was very nice, and then I saw friends and family, and I also got to, take stock of the, of the energy of the atmosphere in the United States, and it's a very, it's troubling times. There were two types of people that I met primarily. I met Jewish people who were very concerned and worried about what's going on with anti-Semitism and the war here, and then I met people, or at least I saw people who were very against Israel, marching against Israel and saying very hateful things, and I noticed a chill whenever I was dressed in a way that was recognizably Jewish. I felt, and maybe I was projecting a little bit, but I felt that people were, not making as much eye contact and not being as friendly, and certainly we are living in very troubling times. Anyway, before we get started, I just want to say I would like to talk a little bit about my trip, and then, but before, I just want to mention that we are in the middle of a fundraiser, and I think it goes on for 1 more week. Is that right? And that anybody who wants to donate, please help us here. We're living in Tzfat, and Tzfat is a tourist town, and because of the war, we're in northern Israel, only a few miles from the border, and so we have rockets being fired at us, and so the tourist industry here has been, probably by 85% has been reduced, and so we are all looking for people across the world who are connected to Tzfat in some way or other, connected to Pnimius Torah, to Kaballah, to support us, our yeshiva. We have an amazing online program here that is just growing exponentially, and we have teachers from across the spectrum of thought, of style in Torah Judaism, and so there's something for everybody here, and we're teaching in English, and we're reaching people from across the entire globe, and so please go to our website and alshechacademy.org, alshechacademy.org, and help us, even with a tiny donation, $1, $2, it does not matter, as long as you're contributing. And as far as spirituality goes, Kabbalah, when you join in something and you take an action and you choose to join in, that is how that is part of the work, and that is an integral part of the work, is that when you choose to be part of something and you take a physical action. So even if you're making a tiny donation, that includes you in our work, in our learning, and in our collective consciousness, in the spiritual work that we're trying to do here. And so it's very important. Okay, so back to, so what I noticed in the United States when I was in New York is that from a spiritual perspective, from a Torah perspective, I found that people who are, who love Israel, who love the Jewish people, and people who hate Israel and hate the Jewish people, there's just so much confusion and so much in a lack of clarity and understanding of why this is all happening, and not only why are these things happening to humanity, but what we can do about them. And so these are two very big questions. And so what I'd like to do is start again from the very, very beginning of the Kabbalistic discussion that we've been having here, and say clearly that's exactly what we're learning here. We are learning about why and how, why the world was created, and what we can do to return it to its perfected state, okay? So, we are learning the Perush, the commentary of Yehuda Ashlag, of Rav Yehuda Ashlag, who's known by his nom de grade, the Bala Sulam, the master of the ladder, for his commentary, where he explains how we climb the ladder of consciousness. So the Bala Sulam, who lived, I believe, he came to Israel just about during the creation of the state of Israel in 1945 or somewhere between 1935 and 1950. The Bala Sulam came from Europe. He was in Warsaw, and he came from Europe, and he settled in Israel to finish his writing, his commentary on the Zohar, the book of Radiance. And so the Bala Sulam says that in Europe, there was a lot of discussion with all the rabbis about, what to do about the anti-Semitism, just like now, and why these things are happening. And so the Baal HaSulam said, Rav Yehuda Ashlag said, point blank, he was the most, out of all the Kabbalists, he was the most direct and the most revealed in his way of speaking. That's why people gravitate towards his commentary, because he is very, very clear and very modern in his way of describing what's going on. And so he said, a lot of people said, we don't know why it's happening and we don't know what to do about it. And then people said we should go back to Israel. The Jewish people should go back to Israel, to our birthright. And some rabbis said, no, we should not go back because people are not following the Torah and that's going to cause more trouble. And so the Baal HaSulam said that because we are going back to Israel, because the Jewish people are going back to their land, the world is going to be more demanding of the Jewish people, that the Jewish people give over the light, the wisdom that's in the medicine, if you will, that is in the Torah. And so the Baal HaSulam was of the opinion, there were different opinions, specifically the Hasidim from the Baal Shem Tov, who said that we should learn Hasidut because there are issues with Kabbalah, with learning the Kabbalah directly. But the Baal HaSulam said, no, it is time that all the Jewish people learn the interior aspect of the Torah called Kabbalah, because the people of the world, when they see the Jewish people in their land, they are going to become very, very demanding that the Jewish people give over whatever it is that's in the Torah. Now, we see today that people are angry at the Jewish people, and they have all these different reasons. They say it's not the Jewish people that we're angry at Israel, and you have all of these commentaries and these people who are, these talking heads online who are talking about, why is the whole UN having these court cases about the Jewish people as if, we are somehow more responsible than everybody else for the problems that are in the world. And so the hard truth, the scary truth, is that the Baal HaSulam, Rav Yehuda Ashlag, says, yes, that is true, that the Jewish people have been burdened, if you will, have been given a special covenant with God to be the protectors, if you will, be the purveyors of the wisdom, God's wisdom that's in the Torah. And that if we don't do our job in a timely fashion, meaning ahead of nature, meaning moving the process of creation along more quickly than nature would propel us, which is the path of suffering in Kabbalah. It's called the path of suffering. When we move forward, when humanity moves forward with only the God of Elohim, the God of nature propelling us forward. That could be a very violent and a very, very painful experience. But if we are proactive, if we understand what's going on, and we have a blueprint, a methodology for correcting the world, for correcting ourselves, for transcending the ego, then we will be able to avoid a lot of the suffering that is otherwise going to face humanity as they struggle to move into the future, into a better place. Okay, so I hope that's somewhat clear. I want to just say now, go back to the very, very beginning and just say what Kabbalah is, what the wisdom of Kabbalah is, okay? So the Torah in general is a methodology, but it's somewhat cryptic and hard to understand. And so when you speak about the internal aspect of Torah, it becomes a lot clearer what the purpose of the Torah is. So the Kabbalah starts off by explaining why God created the world. Okay? So why did God create the world? God created the world because he had a desire, God had a desire to give over goodness to someone. So God wanted to create someone, that's us, all of humanity, so that he could fulfill his desire for giving over goodness. Okay? So the immediate question is, okay, so why does the world look so terrible if that was I thought God's all powerful, right? So why, if that's God's desire, why then do we have such all the suffering, okay? Perfect question. This is the conversation that the Ari HaKodesh, and before the Ari, you had the Rav Shimon Bar Yochai, who was from the time of the Talmud, and this is precisely what they're talking about. Why did God create the world, and how can we work with God to fulfill God's mission of creating a beautiful world, okay? So, we said this all before, I'm going to say it again. That's the beautiful thing about Kabbalah, is that it's a very, very narrow wisdom. We're always going to be talking about the same thing, and it can become very, very tedious at times. And I was thinking about an analogy to try to say, why is it so complicated if we're just talking about this one thing? We're only talking about making the world a beautiful place and transcending our egos and uniting with all of consciousness. Then why is Kabbalah so complicated? And so a good example that I came up with is, let's say you want to go mountain climbing. So you have a very, very simple desire. I want to get to the top of the mountain. Okay? And you have all these reasons why you want to get to the top of the mountain. It's beautiful up there, and it's away from all of the horrible things that happen down in the city, whatever your reasons are, but you want to get to the top of the mountain, okay? And then you start to study mountain climbing, and before you know it, you're studying physics. And now all of a sudden you're studying mathematical equations, and things become very granular and very, tedious perhaps. And why are you studying physics? Because you want to understand the natural world. And so when you're trying to climb this ladder of consciousness, it starts to become very granular. But let's first and always continue to come back to why we're doing this and what we're trying to accomplish. So God had a desire to give over goodness. And so for that to be accomplished, God needed two ingredients. He needed someone who has a sense of self, okay? Someone who has a ability to feel themselves. And that's our ego, the fact that we feel that we exist, okay? And the second thing that was needed is free will, that a person would have to choose in order to desire to return to God, to return to this unity, okay? And so that is a very, very, those two ingredients, if you think about them, or those two prerequisites, if you were to meditate on them, you would realize that everything that's flowing out of those two requirements are causing everything that's happening. So if we have to have free will, because we have to desire, otherwise we'd be a robot. If you made a robot that liked you, and the program was, I like Shlomo Gadzi. So that's the program of the robot. It's not a lot of fun interacting with that robot, because the robot, that's all the robot is you made the robot to like you, and now the robot likes you, and that's not a lot of fun. So God wanted a real entity. He wanted to give over the most beautiful gift, the gift of consciousness, the gift of existing, okay? So now we have those two. We understand, I hope, why we needed those two requirements, free will and a sense of self, okay? So, the next thing that happened is that God wanted to give over to this being. The being is all of humanity that ever lived and ever will live, all of us united in one soul. That's really who we are. All of humanity, everyone who ever lived and everybody who ever will live is all part of this one unified soul. But it was broken into pieces, and we'll learn more about that as we move forward. But what's important to understand is that God is in the aspect of giving. God does not need anything. God does not have any deficiency. God is everything, and is above everything and inside of everything, and something that we can't really appreciate, but we can sense it on some very deep level inside of ourselves. We know what we're talking about, that there's this everything that is everything and undivided and completely unified. And so, since God is in that aspect, he is completely opposite of his creation. So that would be fine. So you have a father who's very, very rich, and he makes a lot of money, and he comes home and he gives you everything. So you have a swimming pool, he has a swimming pool, you have a fridge full of food, he has a fridge full of food, but there's one thing that's keeping you apart. He spends his day giving, and you spend your day receiving. And so God, this is all explained in Kabbalah, God wanted more than that for us. So God said it's not enough that if we remain in the aspect of being a receiver, that we would have a relationship with him that was as close as possible. So what God did do, is he introduced into this unified soul that was receiving all of this pleasure a problem. It's called the bread of shame. So into this program, into this consciousness that was just, imagine a full consciousness of receiving pleasure. You're just this thing like a baby. A baby is just this gorgeous little thing that just wants to take and take and take. And somehow, because the baby is your creation and the baby is so innocent, it's just such pleasure for you to see the baby receiving. But if your baby stayed like that forever, it would be lacking. It would be something that would be, it wouldn't be a full expression of what you wanted to give to this child. You want the child to grow up and to become like you and to become someone with an ability to give something to somebody else, right? So God wants us to be like him. And so because of that, God introduced into this consciousness, this is the world of Ein Sof. This is the world before the world was created, the highest spiritual world. This is a world that only exists in non-physical, of the mind, of the heart. This is not a physical place yet. We're talking about feelings. We're talking about desires. And so into this desire to receive, God introduced a problem. He said, hey, this is us. We said this. I'm not sure I like this relationship. I'm in a perpetual relationship with someone who has everything, and they're constantly giving to me, and I have nothing to give back. So we've discussed this many times. This is why if you go to a party and you are just gobbling up everything and you're swimming in the swimming pool and you're going to you listen to the music of the DJ and you're getting all the food, hopefully at some point you realize, I wonder who's throwing this party and what they're all about and why they're so generous. And so this is exactly what we experience in our lives. It's exactly why we go out and we get jobs and we want to buy our own car, right? And why if I'm driving my own Ferrari, it's a very different experience than if somebody lets me drive their Ferrari, right? It feels very different, right? So this is a very natural wisdom. This is not something everybody talks about Kabbalah as being very, very cryptic and very secret. And so there's many reasons why it's secret that are given from all these different rabbis, but the Baal HaSulam says the reason why it's secret is because nobody wants it. That's the reason. So it's a secret, like if you want to become a decent human being and you want to become a giver and you go everywhere and no one seems to want to do that also, the secret is that they don't care. They care about becoming famous and becoming rich and becoming popular and all that. They want to be take, and you want to give, and so you have a secret. You have a secret. What's your secret? Your secret is that it's better to be a giver than a taker. I remember one time I was in my house and I was a very wild, unruly teenager, and I was busy, figuring out all the great ways that I could have a good time. Get a motorcycle, drive around, go to Hollywood, right? These are all things I was wanting. And I remember one time I was in the house and I was running around and I don't remember what, I was probably getting ready to go out somewhere and do something for myself. And I remember my mother leaned over to my father and said, we should always be givers and never be takers. And my father said, amen. That's what my father said to my mother. My father was a very big rabbi, and my mother was a very holy person. Anyway, the point is that I didn't make much of an impression on me back then about what they were even talking about, but now, after studying Kabbalah, I know exactly what they're talking about. And what they were talking about is that I was a wild kid who was really, really completely consumed with everything that I wanted in life, and it had very little to do with what anybody else wanted or anybody else cared about. I didn't really even have I was so moving so quickly through life, gobbling up whatever I could, that I couldn't even slow down enough to feel that somebody else was feeling something, and maybe that what they're feeling is something different than me. Anyway, l'chaim, everybody. I made a blessing before, so anybody who's curious, before the camera started. Okay, so because of that, and then we're going to go to the book as soon as I get a few more this overview in, because I think that it's really important that, it's not that I think, it's the Baal HaSulam thinks that if we're learning these things in an abstraction just because it's very interesting, we're going to miss the boat. We really have to understand, first we have to identify what the desire is or should be before we start to learn this stuff. Otherwise it becomes very kind of like mysterious, and we're talking about all these different spheros and the Partsufim and all these different amazing spiritual concepts and diagrams, but we're not sure what we're trying to accomplish, which is get up the mountain, which is trying to get out of ourselves, above our egos, without destroying our egos, because we said in our last class that the ego is malchut. The ego is we need the ego. Why? Because the ego is the sense of self that we need to perceive selflessness. So we have a paradox. We need to, if we're going to perceive selflessness, true selflessness would be you don't exist. Now you're selfless. But that's not what we need. We need to have a self and at the same time have selflessness, right? So if you're going to be a selfless person, you still first need to be a person. You need to have a sense of self so that you can perceive what selflessness means, so that you can, right? So this is the paradox of Kabbalah, and we'll get into that as we move forward. But back to this, the basic outline here is that we decided this spiritual entity, this unity, this collective unity that is all of humanity, we decided, hey, you know what? I don't want to stay here in this place. I don't want to, and God did this God programmed this into creation, that we should not want to stay in the aspect of being givers, and we want to become, takers, thank you, of takers, but we want somehow to see if there's a way for us to become givers, and God put that in us, that we have a sense that we can become givers and we can become unified. And so basically what we're living out now is this cascading lower and lower worlds of consciousness until we end up into the world that we're in now, which is an egoistic world, which is governed by selfishness and disunity, right? Because remember, we were all felt as one, and now we're down in the place here where we all feel independent from each other and we all feel selfish, okay, to one degree or another. So what does this have to do with the war, with Israel, with the Jewish people, right? This is a big question. And so since this method, this map has been passed down inside the Torah, and the Jewish people have been given an obligation to safeguard this until people are ready for it. So you see today, we're going out to the world, and we have some people who are interested. And so in the whole entire world with billions of people, we probably have, I don't know how many people, 10,000 people, 20,000 people, 50,000 people, 100,000 people, 200,000 people in the entire world who are saying, there's got to be something better than this. There's got to be some way for us to unify and to come together in love and peace. And maybe it's more people, but then the people who actually found the wisdom of Kabbalah, which is a direct, specific wisdom of how to do that, how to accomplish that. And so that is, anybody who's listening to this, anybody who's sitting in this class, who's hearing this or hearing it from another teacher, has awakened to something very, very profound, to the purpose of creation, which is that we have to somehow, of our own volition, claw our way back to this place where we came from, but with a new sense of self and awareness. So we have this paradox. We exist in our selfish natures, in our individual natures, but at the same time, we have an ability to perceive that we're all connected, and we have a reason to share and to be loving with everybody. And so that's not an easy process, right? Because some people are actually against us. Some people want, so that the method of Kabbalah is, how do we go about doing this work so that we can ultimately reveal the true purpose of creation. Okay, I hope that made sense. Did it make any kind of sense?
Yeah.
It did? Okay, great. Okay, thank you so much, guys, for having me back. Let's jump into the book. We are reading from this book, which is a compilation of excerpts from the introductory articles of the Baal Sulam. And before the Baal Sulam gives you the actual code of the Zohar, it explains to you what is actually being spoken about there because it's encrypted. He has a whole bunch of many articles that he wrote that explain to you what Kabbalah is, and this is what I'm trying to do my best to explain, to give over. And so this is just an excerpt of different sayings from all of the different articles that the Baal Sulam wrote. I want to just say one thing that I'm hoping that, and I'll speak about it with the administrators here, but I'm hoping that we can start another class and go in, and this is the actual introductory article of Rav Yehuda Ashlag that is an overview of his work that describes all the writings of the Ari, the actual map of Kabbalah. And so this is the actual nuts and bolts book. This is only the first of 22 volumes, okay? But I'm hoping that we can do another class and start for students here in person and online who are interested in actually learning the literally learning the, Kabbalah in depth, the actual methodology. And then after we would do this, then we'd move on to actually learning the Zohar together as a group. And so it's a big goal, but let's see how far along we can get. Okay, into the book. The Zohar says that Emunah is a spiritual light. God only gives this light to someone who is making an effort to reach the state of giving. I'm going to read it twice. The Zohar says that Emunah is a spiritual light. God only gives this light to someone who is making an effort to reach the state of giving. Okay, so this is an incredible statement. And, if you want reasons why they don't teach Kabbalah to kids in high school, and this is, you only have to read a few lines till you realize what kind of emotions and what kind of understanding this awakens in us. Okay, so what is being said here is something very profound. A person can be an Orthodox Jew, a person can be a religious Jew, or a religious Muslim, or a religious Christian, or just a wonderful person, a person who behaves very, very well, an upstanding citizen, and they could be doing every single thing because they want a reward. So I am getting up in the morning and I'm going to go to the synagogue and I'm going to pray. Why am I doing that? Because when I get to heaven, I'm going to get $100 or whatever the spiritual currency is up there. I'm going to get that, right? And I'm not eating bacon because God told me not to, and He said that if I don't do that, I'm going to get some reward. Some reward meaning whatever the value and the payback would be for eating. For enjoying this bacon, I'm instead going to get a reward that's greater than that, and people live their whole life that way. And that is called in Torah Judaism, in the words of the Talmud, lo lishma, not for her sake. Who is her? Her is God. Why is it her and not Him? Because the Shekhinah, the lowest revelation of God that sits with us when God's revelation is revealed, is called the Shekhinah. Let's not go into what that is, and it's very complicated. And ultimately we'll learn it inside. But the point is that when a person does things like that, for that reason, it's a good thing. You know why? Because his behavior is good. So if a person comes into this room and he wants a reward, and therefore he's polite to everybody, and therefore he doesn't steal anybody's stuff, and therefore he does all the things that he's supposed to do. He takes a shower in the morning because it says that you're supposed to take care of your body. He does all these things only because he wants a reward. We are the recipients of his good actions, and so that is something. So if we all were living only on that level, meaning no one was making any mistakes, the only mistake we were making, the only trespass that we were. How do you say it? A trespass that we were. Okay, I can't think of the word, but if the only thing we were doing wrong was that we had the wrong intention, we would still be living in a pretty decent place. And so we're not even on that level, right? We're all going around and we're trespassing even on the physical actions that we're supposed to be doing in the Torah. The outside of the Torah is all of the actions, all the physical actions that we're supposed to be taking. And so even though that's hard to do, okay, but we're trying to do the inside and the outside at the same time, because we're in an emergency situation, and we're in this generation where things are changing very rapidly, and we're in an emergency situation. So we are, unlike the sages of old who first mastered the revealed Torah and their behavior was perfect, and then they graduated onto the study of their internal worlds, we're doing them both at the same time out of necessity. So if a person here, Rav Yehuda Ashlag just said that the Zohar says that Emunah is a spiritual light. Emunah, the word Emunah is translated as faith. Whatever that means, it's a spiritual light. He's saying that that's what that is. What's a spiritual light? It's something that's going to pop into your head, some feeling, some thought, some desire, some understanding, right? That you're going to have an aha moment. You're going to be, oh, I understand now. And that's a feeling of revelation. And that's the light. And he said, God only gives this special light to somebody who wants to become a giver. This is profound. So if somebody lives in Kentucky and maybe they don't keep kosher, maybe they're not Jewish, and they say, gee, I feel inside of me that I would like to be a giver. I see the world as such a messed up place, and I feel my own selfishness. I feel that I wake up in the morning and I go to work only to make money to feed myself, and I can't, I turn on the news and I see people from like Africa suffering and people in the Middle East suffering, and I just can't care. I want to care, but I don't care. I care about myself, and I go back to work, and somebody says, this is a problem. This is what's wrong with us. How do we get past this? And the person says, well, I take care of myself, I take care of my family, I take care of my friends. Is that enough? It's not enough. We have to somehow figure out how we're going to the whole entire world, we're all going to get along, we're all going to love each other. And so there's many, many wisdoms and systems and philosophies. They say it's not even possible. Or who knows if that's the point, The Persian said, the point of existence is beauty. And then the Greeks said the purpose is, I don't know what they said, something else. But the point is that, maybe they said materialism, physicality. The point is having a good time, right? I think it was pleasure. The point is that here, the Torah is telling us that the point of creation, the point of life, is that we transcend our selfishness and unite above our egos in love and unity with all of creation, and thereby make a place where the light from God's existence, can be revealed. God hid himself. It says it's one of the first lessons in the Bible is that the word olam, God created the world. What is one way of translating the word olam in Hebrew? Means to conceal. So why would God conceal himself, create a world where he's concealed? We just said why in Kabbalah. The reason is that God wants us to become givers of our own work. He wants us to become like him, so he knew that he had to withdraw himself from our consciousness so that we could do this work. That's what we're experiencing. Okay, next one. There is no difference between now and the future in that the entire earth is filled with God's glory even now. Our work is to act according to the truth even when we don't feel like it. Okay? This is what God did to us. God made a world where we can't readily see him, know that he exists, and now we have an opportunity to decide how we're going to behave. So the example we give is you have kids in a classroom, and the teacher gets up and the teacher walks out. Okay? Now the teacher still exists. The teacher is outside in the hallway. As a matter of fact, the teacher is standing next to the door, and the teacher is looking in the window and can see the students, but the students cannot see the teacher. And so now some of the students behave nicely, but some of the students immediately jump up and start throwing paper at each other and start like turning over the desks and start like, pulling each other's hair, whatever they do, right? So this is the reality that we live in. And so if you want to know why Kabbalah is how everything that we experience in our lives is directly mirrored in Kabbalah, is because Kabbalah is the wisdom of our lives about creation, about what's happening to us. And so we shouldn't be surprised that every single thing that's happening is mentioned in Kabbalah, and we see that it's a very practical wisdom about who we are and what's going on with us. And so the example that we just gave is that a teacher leaves the room, and this, although the kids become wild, this is actually a very, very important learning experience for the children. And this is when a child is faced with a opportunity, free will. How is the student going to behave when the teacher's not there? This is what we are living. God is saying, I am going to make it so that you feel that I'm not here, and now you can decide how you're going to behave. Are you going to become a pagan? Are you going to become someone who just says, I am the strongest person here, and I have I have the sharpest sword, and so I'm going to go out and I'm going to take what I want? And so how many people today live this way? I'm the smartest person. I have I have the ability to go to the best school, and I'm going to become the richest, and I'm going to get the most toys, and I'm going to be the most popular. I'm going to indulge my selfish nature as much as possible. That's the majority of people, and that's the majority, and that's unfortunately that's all of us at some times, right? So all of us behave that way. At least sometimes throughout the day, right? Unless you're a completely righteous person, you've transcended your ego and you've become this kind of this completely unified soul who lives completely and we have people like this in every generation who lives completely. We call them in Torah Judaism, we call them tzaddikim. So unless you're a tzaddik, unless you've completely done all of the corrections climbed the entire ladder of consciousness and unified all of your desires into one single unified desire to give over goodness to everybody else, then you know what it's like to just work for yourself and be selfish and want to, and use all of your abilities, all of your God-given gifts to make your life as good as it can be selfishly. Okay, moving on. In our rectified state, we do not scatter our energies in many different directions. All our energy is connected to God. In our rectified state, we do not scatter our energy in many different directions. All our energy is connected to God. Okay, I didn't read this before, by the way. Guys, I didn't review this before I came. I was just traveling and I had jet lag. So I'm reading for the first time. So this is exactly what we just said, that what is a tzaddik? We have all of these different desires, all of these different levels of consciousness. The higher we climb on this ladder, the more unified and the more altruistic we become. So it's very, very telling. It should be very clarifying for a person that the more unified you become, the more you see everybody else around you as being part of yourself, the more willing you are, the more you are able to give to them altruistically. So if I feel that in Kabbalah, we said this before, we talk about 10 men on a boat. So if we are all on a boat and I have food and you have the compass and you have the gasoline, I'm going to be sharing my food with you guys. Because we're all one. We're all on one boat. We're all stuck with each other. And my happiness, my survival, is interwoven with yours. And so I see it's very natural to share. What happens if one person on the boat gets up and says, but I don't like this. I want to be the boss of everybody and I want to be in control of the boat and I decide we should go in a different direction. Now we have a real big problem. Now we see that's the world we live in. So we have a problem now. I have food and I'm on this boat with everybody else and I want to share with everybody else, but now I have one guy on this boat who is not on the same page as me. He wants to take over the whole boat and take the boat in a different direction. And the 9 other people on the boat are saying, no, we need to go north. That was the plan and that's where we're trying to go. What's north? We're trying to get to unity and to altruism and to get back to a world where God is unified. Now, if somebody comes and says, I don't want to go there. I want to go to a world where materialism is the law of the land, or selfishness. I want to say the strongest survive, and right, Superman, Nietzsche. I want to be whoever's the best looking is the one who should mate with all the women, and everybody else should be out of luck. So now we have a problem, right? So now we understand why we can't just go ahead and love everybody. We have this, these debates, philosophical debates, are exactly what's happening on college campuses. So the Torah comes and says, yes, we want to love everybody and we want to unify with everybody, but we have to unify with people who agree that this is why God created the world and that there is a God and that God created the world and this is the way that we should put it back together and get back to where we need to be. And so now we understand how difficult the work becomes. And so the Baal HaShalom comes and says, get together with 10 men and the women who support them, who drive their desires, right? The women are higher than the men in the fact that, in the sense that desire created the world, not intellect. And so the feminine aspect is the desire, okay? The fundamental force that's driving us is our desires, what we want. And so we need a community, we need to have partners in life who clarify what we're trying to do. So your wife tells you, let me tell you what you're trying to do today. You're trying to get out of bed and go make money and bring it back here and not stop off at the bar. So you have a clarifying force who's trying to just make sure that you understand what it is why you're doing all the work you're doing and how you're going to, right? So if you are living in Svat and you've been, transplanted from across the globe to this place, to the home of Kabbalah, to the spiritual apex of the world, and so we're here. So the Baal HaShalom says, the world is a very, very crazy place, and there is tremendous conflict. So how do you go about the work? And so you start with 10 people who are similar enough to you that you're willing to throw in with them. So if you're running away from a tsunami, and you're running away from, let's say, a war or whatever you're running away from, and you come to the marina and there's 10 boats there, you're going to quickly decide, where are these boats going? What do they have on the boat? Who's on the boat? And what do those people on the boat want? So if you come to one boat and you see that everybody's got a sword and a gun and a this and a that, and you're like, wait, maybe I don't want to be on this boat. This seems like a lot of tension on this boat. And you go to this other place, and it says, yeah, we're just gonna drive out to the, a mile out, and we're gonna park there, and say, I'm not sure that's the right mission. And you find some people who are going on a boat, and they're going to the place where you think is the smartest place to go, and you like these people enough that you're willing to get on the boat with them. Mind you, it's an emergency. If it wasn't an emergency, I would just maybe lie on the beach. But we're in an emergency situation now. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to find 10 people as a bare minimum. It doesn't matter if you're joining us online. It doesn't matter if you're consider yourself a secular person or a religious person. That's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about the internal work, the desire. And so we have to find people who are enough like us that we're willing to do the work and travel up this ladder of consciousness together. And why do we have to choose the people that we're going to go up with is a very deep question. And I once asked it. I used to belong to a Kabbalah group. It was Bala Sulam, but they weren't particularly observant. And I was learning with them for a long time. It was when I was first becoming reacquainted with my Torah identity. And I went to one of the senior people there, students there, and I said to him, he was a teacher already, and I said, are we going up, when we do this elevation, when we do this unity, am I going with you guys, or am I going with whoever I want to go with, like in my mind? It was a very deep question. And he said to me, I'm not going to answer that question. And of course, when somebody doesn't answer your question, you know exactly what the answer is, right? So if somebody says to you, I don't want to answer your question, it usually is not the question, it's not the reassuring answer that you want. And that's one of the reasons that I decided to leave and to go find a different teacher because of that. Because I said, not only do I want to unify and transcend, but I want to know who I'm transcending and unifying with and how far up the mountain we're going. And so this is a conversation that would introduce an entire class about the relationship between the revealed Torah and the hidden Torah. And so there are many spiritual systems that are trying to climb up the mountain of consciousness. But the question is, not only are you starting the journey, but where on this mountain are you going? How high up the mountain are you going? And with whom are you going? And so these are very deep questions that are obviously going to be, we can revisit them in later semesters. But for now, I hope that wasn't too all over the place. And thank you very much. I'm happy to be back. And I will see you next time. Okay, thank you, everybody.